Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here once again with Dan Michelon. We're both planners and partners in Brayshaw Financial Group, and we have a show for you today. But before that, we're going to just do a quick announcement. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're really here to give back and help you find success in your retirement, and that is the theme of just about every topic we have. And in this week's topic, we have trends in retirement. It's part one of a two-part series, and should you stay or should you go? Concept here, and we're going to get more into that. But we've done a lot of shows, Dan, in the past that have talked about places to retire. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but kind of more of the movement of what people are doing throughout their lives and as they're progressing through retirement. And, for our listeners who are either in retirement or considering retirement, it's always wise to learn from what other people are doing and how they're finding success in being, more financially stable, kind of the process of as you age through life, what that looks like. And there's a lot of dynamics there, Dan.
I mean, that decision around, do you consider selling your home, picking up your roots, and moving someplace else is just such a monumental decision. Particularly in retirement, it's one of those things where, if you pick up and go and move and find it not to be to your liking, it's going to be quite difficult to get back, particularly in the Northeast, if that's where you're leaving from, the way home prices have gone. To think of selling here, leaving, and then trying to buy back in, that just sounds absolutely horrific and quite expensive. So, yeah, I think there's just new things to consider, and it's such a big decision. If there's any information out there that you can pull from that can help you be a little bit better educated, a little bit better awareness as to what's going on in these other places you're considering, the better that decision will go.
And there's another dynamic, Dan, to this show that I think is potentially beneficial to a child of a parent who's aging, which is, maybe where you want to move because of where your parents need to go. There's a whole other side to this piece where, it could be of benefit to some of our listeners as they're trying to figure out, well, mom and dad are going to have to move there because that's what's going to happen, or they're going to be going through this process in life. So I don't want to be around to deal with that problem. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure all of our listeners just adore and love their parents. But if you haven't joined us before, we've been doing Money on Tap for probably close to 9 years, I guess now, Dan. And we have a massive library of shows, and you can find us at BrayshawFinancial.com. But you can find us on, all the different, podcast venues out there, iTunes and SoundCloud and, iHeartRadio. But you can go to our website at BrayshawFinancial.com. You can go to yourmoneyontap.com and go through the library and kind of get caught up on different topics. Because I think one of the things that we struggle with is really getting the message to people on what to do, because we can't help everyone. And I think this is one way where you can get multiple, pieces of advice from different planners, different perspectives, that you can apply to your situation without it just being a generic bowl, a cookie cutter shape of you should do this. I think that's one of the biggest problems out there is we try to give people a lot of different angles, and you can find that history in our library. But before we get into trends in retirement, should you stay or should you go, part one, we are going to move right into money in the news.
Up first today, China and Canada immediately retaliate against Trump's tariffs. This is from CNN and Elizabeth Buchwald. And the long-anticipated tariffs regime or kind of mode of operation here from the United States administration has come into effect. And a lot of people have been concerned and considering, what the kind of immediate fallout from that is going to be. And what we've come to see is that Canada in particular has announced, retaliatory tariffs. They're going to place tariffs on $10 billion worth of goods with the opportunity to increase that potentially next month up to $125 billion. So it's a significant tariffs response that's been directed at us here. It's going to be interesting to see, and for sure, the market has not enjoyed that, and we've run into some turbulence here, kind of first couple of days of the tariffs being upon us. So it's interesting to see what the global response has been to this. We've all been prepared for it, considering it, and heard it's coming for quite some time. But the global outcry over this actually coming into effect has been, pretty interesting, pretty dramatic. I think it's going to take some time to really let all this kind of settle out and see where we end up. But, particularly between Canada, China, and Mexico, which represent about 30% of our imports, the reaction has been quick and retaliatory. They're not taking this very well.
There's two sides to every story, and I think one of the things that really irks me, we have like 100% tariff on eggs was an article I read. No matter where that tariff is, it is high. We get a ton of eggs from Canada. The idea that our tariffs are so much lower than all these other countries is really disheartening. It should be equal. It should be fair. And the tariff has not been fair for a long time. And I think this response is probably so far overdue because our political leaders haven't in the past pushed on these numbers as hard as we probably should so that to hold these countries accountable. It's like they need us as much as we need them. They need to sell their goods too. So this has a negative impact on all of these countries too because they're thinking to themselves, okay, we're going to have to pay these tariffs, but oh my goodness, we're not going to be able to sell anything. I don't know how this is going to play out, but one of the things, Dan, I was concerned, was listening to some of the quotes. This is Lin Zhang, which is the spokesman for the China's foreign ministry, and this is quoted in the article. China will fight till the end if the U.S. insists on waging a tariff war, trade war, or any other kind of war. That's a pretty...
Yeah, like I said, dramatic kind of response.
Yeah, there's some stuff here that's definitely concerning. I mean, there's no question about it, and the market is seeing it and so forth. But I think, that's where management styles come into play. And I think when you're looking at the market and you're looking at all the things that are happening, some of this stuff, and you're looking at financials drop, and you're looking at technology drop, and you're having these fears and all of the different pieces that are moving. The truth is that we still have an economy. It's not over. And honestly, some of these things are great buying opportunities if you've missed them in the past. And maybe these are entry points for something that you've watched skyrocket and pull back because AI is not going away. Business is not changing entirely. But our biggest issue really, honestly, Dan, I feel irrelevant of the tariffs, and I know we're changing subjects a little bit, is honestly our rates. Our rates are literally trapping us in properties and real estate, which is what is really hindering the ability to help our economy move forward. I really think. I think these tariffs, they're going to eke out of the market and they're going to figure it out. But I think this is going to bring U.S. companies to have the better ability to sell internationally than they have. I think this is going to make U.S. economies more profitable. That's my long-term perspective, but we'll see what happens.
One of the concerns is, relative to the rate topic is Trump came into office talking about bringing inflation down, which is something we sorely needed, not just for the cost of eggs, but the cost of everything else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think these moves are going to have that effect. So I know he's proposing tax cuts and other ways to kind of affect the other half of the balance sheet, both nationally and in each of our households. But for the short term, near term, I think this is just going to increase that purchasing power pain that we've all been experiencing.
This is where you see opportunity in that space. I mean, we've seen it in the portfolios this year. We've seen positive performance. And that's, I think that speaks to the fact that, if you're getting paid to own something, you can ride something out a little bit different. If you're holding, NVIDIA and you're just saying, well, I'm not getting paid anything and I really need to make sure my money's not going to be gone because I have no other investment inside this. Where's NVIDIA going? That's a different concern, and so I think that's where, value stocks really show their opportunity is in troubled markets. You start taking out some of these things, but then you look at companies like, all the financials, which you're getting hammered, but they've gone on a huge tear. So at what point in time, and we talk about this all the time, at what point in time do you cut your losses and you say, you know what, this trade's over, I'm out. And
is this a ripple or is this a real correction? That's the question.
Okay, well, next up we have the Doge dividend could become law. The proposed bill will be coming in the next few days. This is by Lydia Moynihan by New York Next. This could literally hit every pocketbook of every listener we have out there if this became law and they really did do some of this stuff. So this is saying that the proposal for the Doge dividend, quote unquote, would distribute 20% of government savings to taxpayers. Basically, what they're saying is they're coming through and saying, hey, listen, if we start cutting funds and we start doing all of this stuff, we're going to send 20% back to taxpayers. I think 20% is going to go towards paying national debt, down the national debt, and 20% likely would go to budgetary items in the current year. Elon Musk has bought into this. This is from a 28-year-old hedge fund manager, James Fishback, who actually came up with the idea. And Musk has kind of bought into this. And Trump says we should make this the real deal. We want to incentivize our nation to figure out where waste is. Because ultimately it's going to come back to your pocketbook. I do think it will take some traction in some space, but it's not going to take traction in, hey, this guy's not really doing any work here. We're going to save a $100,000 job at the government level. I don't. Yeah. It's going to be the person who's, calling out, hey, there's some sham going on over here. The real thing that I think is missing in this, and I don't know how detailed this gets, but I'd really like to see, kind of like some whistleblower benefit. I think you should have. Hey, you get a whistleblower who says, hey, listen, there's $600 million. I'm going to get 2% of that number. That person's a millionaire overnight,
Yeah, that's they'll be getting a lot of calls with that. That's for sure.
That's where I really think the whistleblower piece is missing in this scenario.
Yeah, this guy Fishback, who created this concept and has met with Musk about it. The way his math is working, that this benefit would be available, this Doge dividend would be available to net taxpayers, right? So not every American citizen, right. People who actually pay taxes, which is interesting.
And they have to pay more taxes than they would be getting back.
Than they receive in benefit, right? Yeah. So it's kind of a select audience that would be benefiting from this, but the way he estimates it, it's 79 million households who could expect a check of up to maybe $5,000.
That's a lot of money per person.
Which is great. Yeah, that's a tremendous benefit, and with all the savings they're creating, I'm all for it personally.
I'm going to create a I love Doge sign, Dan. If you get a $5,000 check, I'm going to put it on your house.
We'll see about that. No, I'm a fan of this program, and I am a fan of the taxpayer. I always have a suspicious eye when it comes to some of these things. And what's interesting about this, though, is getting back to that anti-inflationary point. I first read this concept. I was like, well, this is just going to be like the pandemic money, the free-for-all that everyone got that people blame the inflation on. So here we are proposing to cut inflation and then, immediately hitting us with tariffs, which is going to drive up costs. And then this program, which is another kind of free money concept, which again, may spike inflation. But, Fishback's position on that is because it's not going to absolutely everybody, that he anticipates it being less of an inflationary issue, which, kind of yet to be seen. Interesting idea, but I do tend to feel like we're, taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back with some of these concepts around here. How are we going to bring down this inflation?
Well, I think what he's trying to say about this concept is that it's not inflationary because, it only hits, about 80 million households, and it's going to be received like your tax refund. You get a $3,000 tax refund or whatever the average is for that household group, and, it goes on a vacation or they go do something, and it's pay down debt or whatever it is. It's not a spendable scenario like the inflationary piece that's going to, drive up demand massively.
Plus, there are goods on the shelf as opposed to last time. So this is someplace to go to spend it.
Exactly, and I think that's the other good point that I think's made here. Well, I do think your point is well received. I do think that, pushing back a large amount of money to taxpayers really incentivizes people to get more concerned and more involved in how are we spending our money as a nation. What I would really like to see is 60% going to our national debt and 20% going to a current year budget. That's what I would prefer to see. I think that's where we really need to get ourselves in shape. We need to really, because there's a whole nother, dynamic inside this tariff concept from, China and Canada and all this other stuff. I mean, China buys so much of our national debt. I mean, they buy these bonds constantly. And to wage a tariff war could create a whole debt crisis problem. And I think paying down our debt is something that could really empower us. I'm not sure is being considered inside that space. So, I mean, if we can save, a couple $1 trillion, I wouldn't mind seeing, 3% of our national debt go away.
Yeah, I mean, driving down, not to harp in this, too long here, but driving down those interest rates is the best long-term solve for our country.
Oh, absolutely, because that's
the bond payment. That's exactly
that's the rate we pay on our own debt. I mean, this is so stupid. I can't believe Powell's got these rates. It's hampering housing. It's hampering everything. And at this point in time, the economy's I don't think we have an inflationary issue other than maybe tariffs coming through the door versus people are just not spending as much. I mean, we talk to people all the time. I mean, they're figuring out, they're getting a little tighter on their budget. They're realizing that food costs are more expensive. They're focusing on the core essentials. That's,
restaurants are really suffering.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I went to a restaurant the other night, and it was a weeknight, but I mean, it was barren. I mean, it was like, where would you like to sit? So I think that's that's kind of the ironic change.
Next up, IRS layoffs underway as tax season kicks off. This is from Anna Sulkin-Stern.
It's just music to my ears to listen to this title, Dan.
This was a good article. I think this is something that we've all had eyes on as one of the campaign promises that we thought would be a good thing. It come in response to, under the Biden administration, the proposed and partially followed through on kind of massive inflation of the IRS workforce. I know the Biden administration proposed hiring 80,000 new employees. I don't think they ever quite got to that, but they certainly went on a bit of a hiring spree. And the Trump administration has come in and basically said, all probationary hires, which is people that have been hired in the last few months or people that have been promoted to a new position, those folks seem to be lined up as the first potential layoffs.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the only thing I think the IRS needs to really worry about is keeping the staff on the people who answer the phone and work on the paperwork, because getting any sort of turnaround, I mean, they're like 18 to 24 months, turnaround on some of this stuff. It's crazy how, if anything, they just need to write the letters and take care of the stuff and get people their money back or, deal with it. But as for going after, middle class, small business owners as an agenda to, address our budget with the Inflation Reduction Act is not really the right way to do it. Like, we need to get our economy moving. We need businesses to boom. We don't need them overwhelmed by, audit after audit after audit. I mean, for the most part, there's people out there that are probably, saving a few bucks here or there, but it's not going to change our national debt, like we can do in other areas like tariffs and some of these other things I think are probably more relevant.
Let's not forget the Doge whistleblowers on the line, keeping an eye on the books. And, it's probably we have these tax evasion issues in small companies. It's probably people that are working in those businesses on a regular basis that see it first and recognize it.
I mean, just to clarify for some of our audience, like the majority of the auditors were focused on mid to large companies. This 80,000 employee hire, the vast majority was to dig deeper into small companies who are probably nickel and diming their tax scenarios. I mean, and no offense, but it's not. I just don't think that level of workforce is really necessary. I mean, if we had a problem, auditing, our Fortune 500 companies, I would be like, well, then that's an issue we need to address. I mean, these would be massive tax changes. But if the guy's running a plumbing business out of the back of his truck, I'm really not thinking that's going to change our national debt, because I need that guy to show up at my house. I mean, that's kind of how I look at this, and I'm kind of enjoying the fact that this is happening. So, as probably a lot of our listeners are too. So, well, that's going to do it for us in Money in the News. We're going to be right back with Trends in Retirement, Part 1. Should you stay or should you go? That's the question. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And, please go to Facebook, go to Instagram, YouTube, like us, subscribe. That's helpful. It helps pay the bills, keeps us there. And then also, if you have show ideas, you have questions, please email us. We love to respond to our audience. Thank you very much. We're going to be right back with you. Are you looking for personalized guidance to kickstart your investing journey? Look no further. Brayshaw Financial Group and our planners are here to help. Our team of experts will provide personalized advice tailored to your financial goals. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today to schedule your free consultation. Brayshaw Financial, investing made easy.
Thank you for joining us for Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's show with Ben and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Michelon. And thank you for sticking around after Money in the News here. But if you're just joining us, we're talking about trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go? Part 1 of 2. We get a lot of questions about where to retire, what to do, what the future story does. There's a lot of personal conversation around that, but there's also a lot of financial conversation around that, and we want to really dive into that today. You have questions on this topic or something else, you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us those questions or thoughts about the show or anything at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And if you get a chance to go to Facebook or Instagram, appreciate that. Subscribe, like, YouTube, all those wonderful social media programs out there that I love so much. I'm just kidding. Anyways, but, I think about trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go? I want to put to bed, the conversation around the personal side, because that could just overwhelmingly just change every thought you have, irrelevant of the financial components around it, and maybe some personal goals and desires, because people have, their children, their grandchildren, and your kids may be spread around the country. You may have better relationships than some or others. You may love one of them more than all of them. And, those are complex dynamics, and that could really affect or hinder some of that. And then, the child that you don't love as much, well, maybe the financial means is the reason to go there. So we're going to go through that. But I do know, Dan, when we talk to people, where their family is what is really most important to the majority of our listeners. And I have noticed, and you and I have had the opportunity of speaking and being part of the Grandparenting Network, which has been really interesting and eye-opening, not being a grandparent yet, hopefully one day. But the idea that, grandparents are really spending a lot more time with their grandchildren than statistically in the previous generation.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I like this kind of multi-generational approach to influencing our kids and sending along certain lessons. Just that extra degree of closeness I do really appreciate. So I think that is contributing to this trend around that decision. Do you stay or do you go? I mean, I think that factors in, primarily. And one other thing that might be throwing people off, we've had a couple kind of mild winters in a row until this year, right? And so I think I can just speak from experience with my own parents who liked the winter down in Florida. The year before they just kind of stayed, and they've been cutting their trips shorter and shorter and shorter. But this winter, obviously the weather has been, significantly worse than the last few. So
what better reason to have them around than to shovel your yard?
Yeah, right. I mean, more hands
Mom,
on deck,
Dad,
right?
get outside.
Yeah, but they
show your grandchildren how hardworking you learned as a childhood.
You got to shovel uphill both ways, right? Is that one of the old adages?
We still need to see grass in mid-December.
So, they cut it short this year, but I think they probably regretted that. So anyway, there are some changing trends, and part 2 of this show is going to dive into, even some more kind of twists and turns in this planning. But for a long time, the general thought around, retirement destination planning has factored in, closeness to family and weather, I think, are kind of 2 of the leading elements. But, there is a lot more to that, and we're going to break down that decision for you and really just run you through the points that should be, very dutifully considered, because this is a major move. This is a significant thing, should you opt to do that. And, another rising trend is renting versus buying, and we're going to get into that too.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting conversation, and we've had that with many people. But I do, separate from the whole financial dynamic and having grandparents be near their grandkids, there's proven statistics that, it is the emotional well-being of those children. But there's a lot you can teach your grandchildren through these financial decisions that they're going to see you live out and go through that process. Let's start here, Dan. The component of the list of things you should be writing down, because you made a really great point. The one piece about climate is a big deal. And I mean, it's probably the one people talk about the most, right? It's really an emotional experience. Like, what climate do you like? Well, do you like New England, or do you like Florida, or do you want a drier place like Arizona? Like, everybody's desire of where they want to retire is different. But climate it's almost like, well, I love my kids. Oh, I don't love my kids that much. I'll go to Florida. That's kind of the New England conversation. But that is only one of many, many considerations that probably have as much equal weight as just climate. But unfortunately, we're so destined to the idea of what we've been told retirement should look like that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your retirement needs to look like.
You're right. They just have this preconceived notion of what does retirement look like, and they just kind of dutifully follow along.
There's a reason the villages exist in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, and I spent some time in Florida, and I know from my parents' experience and going down there, drive down the 1,500 miles, bring the dog, load up the car, and head on down, and they're surrounded by New Englanders. It's like they don't meet anybody from Florida, in Florida. That is something that they do appreciate, the fact that virtually everybody around them is certainly from somewhere else in the country. Nobody's from Florida, but the vast majority in these particular areas. And there's a couple different spots they'd like to go. They've chosen the rent path instead of the buy, so they kind of move around a little bit. But in every place they've gone, they've almost immedately found a pocket of New Englanders that speak the same, feel the same, complain about the same things.
Complain about everything.
Yeah, everything is probably fits into that category. But then they hang out and just do the senior living thing, and they really enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, very few people in the South can appreciate the level of sarcasm that comes from the North. I've seen some blank faces with some of the sarcasm.
There's no sweet tea up here.
So, well, the big issue for many people in retirement is the idea of health care. And it's not just the cost of health care, Dan, but it's the provision of health care. I do see so many people that are like, well, my doctor's here or my doctor's there, and I've got this illness that I've been carrying, a chronic illness of some sort, and I need that care. And trying to make that transition and like move to Florida and say, well, I've got to find a whole new, medical group of people that understand my condition, have that history and so forth. That's a big piece. So figuring out where that kind of high quality medical provision is super important. So just moving out to the sticks is just not an option for some people.
Yeah, I mean, just availability and access is a must. I mean, we're talking about the kind of aging segment of the population, so medical concerns, typically speaking, are on the rise. I mean, again, referring back to my experience, my parents are doing pretty well, but they're, the month before they go, it's just chock full of appointments and checkups, and they want to make sure everything's in order because they just don't, and I don't think it's that they don't necessarily trust the care in Florida, but they just don't have that relationship with anybody down there, and their availability and access and those things. They're just not really familiar with that as they are here locally. So, yeah, it just, creates this whole cadence to the year that's just kind of odd to watch it all happen. But, they go through all this trouble just to get down there. And, they avoid the cold, so I've got to give them credit for that. Their father loves to call and give me the temperature check. I mean, every day, that's the, it's about 72, 70, it's one of those things.
Honestly, it's so hot. I don't even want to go outside and look at
the dog's sweating, chasing lizards around, and I'm out here digging my way through 1.5 feet of snow. But, so, I mean, that part always rings true. But, they're just so happy to get back to family when they finally make it back here that, sometimes you just kind of wonder if it's all worth it. And are they making these decisions just out of habit, or is it truly just the avoidance of the cold, which I can very firmly understand?
Yeah. So after you get through climate and healthcare, which are probably, the top 1 and 2, the third level is really cost of living, because people say, well, can we, do we like where that location is? Can we get all the medical care we need? Because, I mean, I know people that travel all over the country still getting the right kind of medical care, no matter where they live. Yeah. And that specialist. So, once you cross those two bridges and you're like, this isn't a possibility, the next question is, can you afford it? The cost of living in that location, and where does that actually fall into, your financial planning that you've done, and how much money you've put away and what kind of income you can generate from that? Because I've told people for years, it's, you go through this accumulation phase in life, and that's where you're, acquiring all your assets and your wealth. But then you go through this, transition. And most people treat it like a light switch where it's, I accumulated this, now I need to distribute this. And it's really a transition piece. And the more you transition, the better off you actually are financially. People don't really realize that. But, when you go into that distribution phase of life, that's where you're creating income, because it's all about income. It's not how much you're worth. I mean, those old ING investment and banking commercials, like, what's your number? Like, that is the worst way to communicate retirement. I mean, it's what's your income need, And so, when you say, hey, this is what I would need to live, or this is what I can create to live, then all of a sudden you've narrowed it down to, I like these climates, I like Arizona, I like Florida, I like California, I like these things. Oh, you know what? California is ridiculously expensive. Sorry, that's not going to exist. And you start going through that. I had a conversation with a client in California the other day, and I was talking to him. I said, do you think you're going to retire here? And the husband instantly said, of course we are. And then the wife said, I was thinking about the cost of living here in retirement, how much more we're going to pay in taxes just by being here. And, I said, well, maybe another chapter of your life is California's not over, but maybe it's a different chapter somewhere else. And I said, if you move to a state without income tax, well, you can maybe consider Roth conversions and, some other tax incentive planning for later on down the road, California living, So that was an interesting conversation. So I think, cost of living and even further, financial planning through retirement and how moving in different places from like a high income tax state to a maybe low or no income tax state may really be a decision in how to magnify your money long term.
Yeah, and income tax, taxes is a huge consideration, but it's not the only one. It's I think it makes a lot of sense to have visited an area that you are really considering making your new home, your retirement destination, and you really got to get a firm grasp on all the living expenses. What is it actually going to cost to live here? What are restaurants like? What are grocery stores like? What's the price of gas? How's insurance and taxes and all those things. So to get that real life experience and to really firmly understand what your new budget is going to look like is an important part of that. And I think it's something else that's important we kind of touched on before, but the community that you're considering, other than the medical needs and the costs, which are kind of more core concerns, but what is that community like? To my parents' experience with all the New England transplants is, are they going to be the type of activities that you enjoy? Is the type of people around? Are there opportunities to network and make new friends? Because as we've become more and more aware, and I think the knowledge of this is expanding every day, one of the keys to a successful, healthy retirement is that continued engagement with the world around you. Right? You still want friends. You still need interaction. You still need that social life. So what are those things like? What's available for you there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to the community piece there, and I do understand the complexity. Even when I went to college, down south, I remember that all of my friends, echoed from the north. It was really funny. It's not like I had this huge group of friends from like the Carolinas or anything. I don't even know anyone from the Carolinas, but because your background of obviousness, how you see things, your interpretation of the world around you, you want to have community inside those conversations, and it draws you naturally together. So community is important. So if you move to an entirely different part of the country, you may not have, like if you go to Arizona from New England, it's not a big retirement destination, though people do go there. It's not like it's going to be in Florida and vice versa from the Midwest. So that's an interesting piece. And then family proximity, we talked about this earlier, and the complexity of family proximity is so much bigger than normal just because so many kids live all over the place and are doing all sorts of jobs and experiences, and the exposure of community is so much more diverse because they go to college and they meet somebody from the entire other side of the country, and next thing you know, your son's following his wife out west, and you're like, well, we're never going to see him again, So these are complex conversations and trying to figure that out. So when it comes to that, I tie that right into the idea of transportation, because if you move to a remote place with a kind of a secondary or tertiary airport destination, it's going to be hard to get out west. So you may want to actually look at locations that give you flexibility to reach your family well. And I think that's one of the big pieces. Hey, you're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap. We're talking about trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go? Part 1 of 2. We're helping you bring an opportunity to understand how to maximize your retirement and the questions you need to be asking yourself on how to get to the best retirement location you can be. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Hello, everyone. This is Dan Mickle on a Brayshaw Financial Group. Are you looking for professional guidance to kickstart your investing journey? Look no further. Brayshaw Financial Advisors are here to help. Our team of experts will provide you personalized advice tailored to your financial goals. Visit us at BrayshawFinancial.com today and schedule your free consultation. Brayshaw Financial, investing made easy.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Michelon. We're both planners and partners at Brayshaw Financial Group. And you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're talking about trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go? Part one. And going through this very complex checklist of things you need to really consider, because it's not just about, oh, I really want to be in warmer weather. It's so much more complex than that. Between the personal dynamics, the cost dynamics, the community dynamics, we talked about that. I briefly left off on the transportation and the location and proximity of like big, huge airports and being able to get to your family because they're kind of all over the place in these days traditionally. But I was also going to say train transportation is really interesting. It's not something people talk about commonly. There's the Amtrak North-South line and so forth. There's, people transport their cars from, I think, the Virginia area to Florida. They'll drive halfway down. And so train proximity is very interesting in that piece. Plus, what's also very valuable is for older people where, they're having either medical issues or they need access to a bathroom very regularly, which is a very common scenario. Having a train and being on there, it might take you about the same time to drive north and south or pretty close to it, but you can have a bed, you can have, toilet facilities, internet, dining car. Like there's a lot of opportunity inside, taking advantage of transportation through the rail system, which is interesting because I've realized that in this community of retirees, that's becoming a more, aware subject and topic that a lot of people aren't really talking about. And train transportation is pretty inexpensive. It's like, it's car time, but it's much more convenient. So that's an interesting piece in the transportation. But when you break out trying to get to your family, it's important to all of us, and that's going to include all sorts of family, ones you maybe don't want to see. So maybe you want to move as far away from an easy airport and you can tell them how difficult it is to get there.
Yeah, and another transport consideration is, oftentimes, you have two cars at home, where when you're certainly in your working days and when you retire or even if you just, do a seasonal kind of retirement experience, you're typically downsizing to one car for that, right? You don't typically drive two cars from Massachusetts down to Florida, right? So you end up with, less access to a vehicle for a couple. So things like, buses and availability of Ubers and whatever,
Right.
Just even for the local errand kind of running, things get a little complicated when you're down to one vehicle and someone's got appointments or someone's golfing or who knows what. But those are all just things that you can easily look into and should be part of the consideration process. Is just understanding what's available at your fingertips for all kinds of transportation needs. Well,
yeah, and I think the Uber in that conversation is definitely concerning for older couples and retirees because they're just unsure about the safety of that and all of that, which brings us into the safety conversation and crime rates and how comfortable do you feel and do I want to be an Uber person? Am I comfortable with using my phone and trusting that? And I mean, there's a lot of things and safety. If you're not rating safety, I would be honest with you, you're really missing a big conversation because sometimes things are inexpensive or affordable because they're not really safe places to live or be, and the crime rates might be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we've come to learn that people target seniors. It's a vulnerable, portion of our society that, for kind of the worst of us, they target folks like that. And they certainly are aware of what communities draw seniors and retirees, and they focus in on those places. So it's something that, again, very readily, easily found, available information that should be part of this process.
Yeah, and I mean, criminals out there have thought of 1,000 things we haven't. That's how their minds work, and that's why they're criminals. And, the criminal perspective is how close can I get to the seniors? They're going to want to move to those areas. So that means when you actually make a move to like an over 55 community or something like that, if that's the direction you want to go, realize these criminals are attracted to those places as well.
And always taxes, right? That's a big concern. And in everything we do, I mean, that is we should probably do a study on this, but probably the most frequently spoken word on the show over the last 9 years is taxes, right? I mean, it's something that we talk about each and every day, and it's part of every show. And
it wasn't Ben. That was brilliant. I thought that was
brilliant is probably second or third, but I think taxes is probably still holding the number one spot here. So, that is part of what you do need to think in. Factor into the overall budget. I know we kind of hit on that in the cost of living, commentary as well. But taxes are important to consider. Particularly if you're changing residency in in a full-on way. If you're officially exiting a state and establishing residency in a new state, well, those state taxes are going to become a real factor right off the bat. And as we looking forward into some parts of the show where we compare states. Ben, you made the mention of, look for a state without income tax potentially. But, New Hampshire shows up on one of our lists here as a great place to retire, and it offers no income tax. However, it's one of the most expensive property tax states in the country. I think it's second or third. So just because the lack of income tax alone does not complete the tax picture. You need to really look closer.
Yeah, see, the thing about taxes, folks, is that, a lot of people look at these things in a very linear thing, like, okay, what's my income tax rate? What's the state and federal, and how's that work? And they're working through all these pieces, and then they start talking about property taxes and, all these cost of living things. But the truth is that, like I had mentioned about that, one client of ours, out in California, and talking to them about taking a different chapter in life, there's this three-dimensional concept around tax planning that can help you in all different stages of your life. Because, moving to an income tax free state, and maybe even, Dan, you're not buying a place, you're renting a place, like we had mentioned briefly, that gives you the ability to start effectively transitioning your portfolio, whether it's a Roth conversion, whether it's doing charitable trust giving, whether you're getting into some advanced tax planning techniques. There could be a lot of different things that you could do. People who own properties, you may own a duplex or a quadplex or something. Nothing says you can't move into one of those for a couple of years and then sell it and avoid some of the capital gains tax. So there's things you can do to really start planning out your retirement in a way that can make long-lasting impact for you. And people just look at, hey, what's the state tax? Oh, that's a lot. That's more than I'm paying, Or people say, oh, I'm moving out of New York. I'm going to save that. But there are other ways to empower yourselves tax-wise that you can do. But Dan, let's take a minute and just jump into some of these, most affordable places to retire.
Yeah, this was interesting to see because some of the names that pop up here aren't, certainly wouldn't have been on my list for consideration, quite honestly, and I wasn't aware that, they are kind of retirement hotspots. But Fargo, North Dakota was one of the places that popped up on the list, which, I'm
thinking cardboard box on the side of the street before I moved to North Dakota.
Yeah, this, like I said, surprise names here, a couple surprises.
Maybe North Dakota is just absolutely beautiful, and they've pinned it out as this kind of barren desert, cold isolation.
Yeah, I mean, that could be some false advertising just to keep us all away. That us New Englanders have a reputation, I guess. But again, that appears on the list, and primarily because of the cost of living. Housing costs are about 15% below the national average, and North Dakota does have a favorable tax situation. However, that's not enough to convince me. I can tell you right now, that's not going to be in my cards. But
well, if you're not moving there, maybe I will then, Dan.
You can have it. You can absolutely have it. Yeah, for me, if I'm going anywhere, weather will be the primary driver of that decision.
Yeah. The next one up we have is Charleston, West Virginia, which is pretty amazing. I mean, it sounds great, sounds beautiful. I mean, I think of West Virginia. It's not my number one. It's not on the coast. It's not dead south. But, the median monthly housing costs are 26% below the South's median, which is considered low to begin with, which I think is very interesting. It offers property tax homestead exemptions and eligible residents 65 or older. I mean, there's a lot of real opportunity there. Interesting. West Virginia is beautiful. It's beautiful.
Not a place I've been, but yeah, I mean, it's at least moving in the right direction for me, so I couldn't scratch that one off the list entirely. But the next one up is Lakeland, Florida, which, anytime you're looking at a retiree list, Florida's showing up. That's
I was shocked about Lakeland. I've been to Lakeland.
I don't know it that well.
Oh, that's a questionable area, Dan. I'm not sure about the safety. I have some. My son had some friends that went to school over there. I have some Lakeland stories that I don't know.
All right. Well, we're gonna just move on past that one, I guess.
But maybe there's a part of Lakeland that's really nice.
Well, what it does offer on top of the crime is access to cities and entertainment. It is It is, in some degree, a thriving place, I guess, on the criminal element as well. But it has access to health care and transportation. So there are certainly some noteworthy positives there, but I did not have the inside scoop on life on the ground.
I know.
So
I'm sorry about that, but no, I saw it, and I it is what it is. It's number 3. So I just, I can't. Maybe that's some false advertising there. So I'm really kind of settling on the West Virginia out of the 3 options, Dan.
I'm convinced. Yeah, we'll be neighbors again, Ben.
So. But there's a lot of affordable places to retire. Just to list some of these off. We have, Lexington, Kentucky, Oklahoma City, Omaha, Nebraska, Montgomery, Alabama, Davenport, Iowa, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Hickory, North Carolina, Wichita, Kansas, Huntsville, Alabama, and Fort Wayne, Indiana. I mean, there's a lot of Midwestern country, states are, comfortable places to retire financially, and a number of, I look at all these things. They're not really on my checklist, but when affordability comes into play, and let's say you have a child who's living on the West Coast, one in the Northeast, one in the Southeast, and, one nearby, Texas, Arizona kind of thing, maybe a central hub is really a good play for you because you're not going to spend all your days there.
Yeah, that gives you an opportunity to kind of get out to either coast in half the time and have a, kind of a more vacation-based, mobile retirement.
Yeah. So let's talk about the top 10 places to retire in 2025.
Yeah, this was interesting. So that first list we just rattled through was really affordability focused. Now, this next list is bringing into play and consideration a couple of categories, affordability being obviously one of them, but quality of life and access to health care are 2 of the other key considerations here. And, I think that's presenting more of a holistic picture, but, and this is ranking by state, not by city and state. And, of course, once again, Florida represents well, and they're coming in at number 1 due to its relatively low taxes for retirees, including no estate tax, inheritance, or income taxes, and just the general overall low cost of living. The health access score was not great, but with all things considered, it was still enough of a kind of a numeric consideration for them to be number 1.
Yeah, and I think I really like this. I do like the quantitative score analysis because it puts a lot of these factors we talked about in the early part of the show. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Money on Tap. We're talking about, trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go, part 1. And we went through all of the list of items that you should be considering. And it's not just, hey, I want to be in a warmer climate. There's so much more to the detailed thought of healthy, strong retirement. And you will make concessions. I mean, you have to. It's just
no place is going to be perfect. Yeah.
So I do like the quantitative analysis of these things and to find this stuff out there. I did find it interesting, Dan. Here, New Hampshire's number 7 again, as it was last year, and then it's a solid state. I mean, anybody from New Hampshire, born and raised, Dan, I very much value. Anything south of that, I get concerned.
I'm still an outsider 15 years in. I can feel that. And that's the true New Englander. That's the real New England feel. You can live someplace for 20 years, but that's not enough.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I said it to somebody, I go, yeah, you'll be here 5 years and you just got here.
Oh, yeah. It's sad but true, but I'm still using Waze to get around. I mean, I don't know where the heck I'm going half the time, but New Hampshire scored well. I was surprised to see that. In fact, a number of these states that came in the top 10 are...
It beat North Dakota, Dan.
Yeah, that's true. But it's an awful lot of cold weather states, and so somehow weather is dropping out of the point system here. But New Hampshire got high marks for one being a relatively small state, so you can access the coast, the mountains, the cities. It's all drivable. It's beautiful. It's scenic. It's really full of activities, and there are just some wonderful opportunities for seniors here. But where it didn't score well is in the tax situation, and as well they said access to some entertainment things, sporting events, restaurants, etc. It wasn't stacking up as high on the list for those kinds of amenities. But honestly, if that's being in crowds,
I can get to the Boston Garden in an hour from here.
That's what I think. But if chasing crowds around and being, that's not the type of community you're looking for anyway, I think New Hampshire should rank well. I mean, it is going to be towards the expensive end, but I mean, it's just beautifully scenic, very, very safe. Healthcare is great. There's just a lot of positives here for sure.
You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw. You are in the middle of our Trends in Retirement. Should you stay or should you go? Part 1 of 2. And we're talking about places to retire right now. And we're actually going to come right back. We're going to talk about some foreign locations that retirees are considering. We're excited to share that. If you have questions or you want the list for the top 10 places to retire in 2025, feel free to reach out to us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Be happy to share that white paper with you. And if you missed part of the show, please go find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, all the different podcast venues, and you can get us there. Or go to our website, BrayshawFinancial.com, too. You can find that. We're going to be right back and close this show out with some good foreign locations to retire.
Hey guys, Seth Krussman with Brayshaw Financial Group. Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Look no further than Brayshaw Financial Group. Our team of experienced advisors is dedicated to helping beginners like you build wealth through smart investing strategies. Visit BrayshawFinancial.com today and start your journey towards financial independence. Brayshaw Financial Group, your partner in wealth creation.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. I'm Ben Brayshaw, joined here with Dan Michelon. You are listening to Trends in Retirement. We have a closeout here on this show. Should you stay or should you go? I think you should stay and listen to the rest of this show. This is part 1 of part 2. And we just went through the top 10 places to retire in 2025. We discussed the things you should consider in evaluating retirement outside of just, climate and, family. Those are kind of the topical conversations most people have. You can email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Happy to share those top 10 places to retire and the sources on that information. You can also reach us at 855-226-8551. But we want to take the last few minutes here and discuss some of the foreign locations retirement is considering.
Yeah, and I think this is becoming more and more of a trend. And one of the major advantages of this consideration is that the cost of living in virtually every instance anywhere you go besides the United States is going to be significantly lower. Affordability, you can really amplify a budget in some of these other countries for sure. There's just no doubt about that. But one of the biggest things, the biggest concern for me would be, well, do they speak English, right? So it's hard for me to consider learning a language in retirement, but the ability to communicate with people is paramount, which is why a number of these places are here in Central and South America, which, the access and, the ability to find English speakers is probably better than in some other places.
Yeah. Costa Rica came up as number 1, and everything I've ever heard about Costa Rica sounds good. I know there's some crime, but my understanding is it's not, obnoxious. But what was interesting to me was number 3 was Mexico because of proximity to the United States. But right now, you travel outside resorts and so forth, Mexico's got a really bad criminal element, and that concerns me.
And certainly some of the stuff that's kind of really near term and hopefully very temporary, but our governments are not getting along really great right now. So seems like a bit of a contentious
Is there something
situation.
going on there, Dan?
There might be. I don't know.
I'm surprised Ukraine's not number 4.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be an old list. We would have to go ahead and scrap that. I do not recommend Ukraine for
There's some beautiful wheat fields over there, Dan. Well, anyways, but number 4 was actually France. And there's a lot of charm to France. I mean, there's some interest there. I definitely find that unique. But again, you do have international travel involved in transatlantic travel involved in some of these things. The one thing that I was just like is just not an option is for me personally, Dan. Malaysia came up as number 5, and I just think Southeast Asia just sounds like the really wrong direction for me.
Just too far. I mean, it's literally the other end of the world, and
cost is really low.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly stretch a dollar, but yeah, I would agree. I just the safety concerns, the healthcare concerns, and I don't speak any of this from experience, but just my gut feel sounds like that would be potentially riskier in a lot of ways.
Could be a small chapter in a retirement event. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a vacation.
Yeah,
you go and you come back.
Maybe you just don't go. But then there's Thailand. That came up as number 8. And there's a whole list of these things out there for you, folks. Happy to provide that for you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking about trends in retirement. Should you stay or should you go? It's time for us to go today. And we're going to be back next week with part 2 of Trends in Retirement. And this piece, this first show really is setting some groundwork for some important things that you need to work through as retirement phases in your life change. And that's where we're going to dig deep. Don't go anywhere for that. Be back with us next week. You have questions, you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Be successful in your investing. We'll see you next time.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of Osaic Wealth Incorporated. Osaic Wealth Incorporated and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.